6:47 past the hour. It's been called the most important election this year because it could decide the future of abortion rights, redistricting, and more in a key battleground state. Voters in Wisconsin can cast their ballots starting today in the state's high-stakes Supreme Court race. And later today, Republican-backed Dan Kelly will face off against Democrat-supported Janet Protasewicz for the first and only debate just 2 weeks before Election Day. Whoever wins the April 4th election for a seat vacated by the retirement of a conservative justice will determine majority control of the court for at least the next 2 years, including leading up to the 2024 presidential election. The Wisconsin Supreme Court came within one vote of overturning former President Donald Trump's defeat in 2020, and this year's election is expected to be tight, with the minority vote seen as crucial in a state where about 80% of the population is white. Joining us now, Academy Award-winning screenwriter and founder of No Studios, John Ridley. He grew up in Wisconsin and held an event last week with young people to help turn out the vote. Ridley, it's great to see you again. Obviously, your home state, but tell us what compelled you to get involved in this way.
As you say, Mika, it's where I was born and raised. My parents still live in Wisconsin. My parents were about service. My father was a doctor who served in the U.S. Air Force. My mother was a teacher. Her younger sister, Beth, her family still lives there. And with my older sister, Lisa, as you mentioned, we started No Studios, which is really about art and activism. And over the last year, we held debates with the Republican gubernatorial candidates. We held Q&As with Senator Ron Johnson, as well as Governor Tony Evers, and as well as Q&A with both of the candidates, Dan Kelly, as you mentioned, and Janet Protasewicz, which is someone from Wisconsin. That is a very good, durable Wisconsin name. So we had a Q&A with them with WISN in Milwaukee. And this really is an important election. Mickey, you mentioned it all. Reproductive rights, the laws in Wisconsin date back to 1849. So before members of my family were free people, these laws about women's rights were in place, gerrymandering, gun control, potentially overseeing elections. All of that is on the ballot. And in Wisconsin and frankly across America, unfortunately, young people are more likely to go to concerts than they are to vote. So among the things that we're doing, we're part of the I Voted Festival. More information about that, go to ivotedfestival.org. People should vote no matter what. But if you vote, if you show that you are a voter, you can go to free concerts across Wisconsin. We want to get people out. This is important. We know people are tired of hearing about every election is an important election, but that's the truth. And if we don't engage and we're not part of the process, things won't change. However you believe, whether I agree with you or not on the policy, vote. Be part of the process.
Yeah, you know, John, Wisconsin really is just the heart of so many challenges. And when Democrats, you know, a couple of years ago were complaining about this happening or that happening, and how could this be? I'd say, you know what? Republicans have gerrymandered the state. Republicans focus on local politics. Republicans focus on this sort of stuff. So if you didn't like the jury instructions in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, Jesus didn't write those instructions. They didn't come down from high. It was by the state legislature who was elected by local people. If you don't like the fact that Democrats always outperform against Republicans and compared to how many seats they get in the state legislature, well, again, don't blame the guides, blame yourself. And so I can't think of a state that's more important for people who care about representative democracy and who hate gerrymandering to focus on than Wisconsin, because it's as bad as it gets.
Yeah, Wisconsin, Joe, is probably the swingiest of swing states. As mentioned, Senator Ron Johnson, very conservative Republican, was reelected by a wide margin. At the same time, Governor Tony Evers, very progressive Democrat, in my opinion, a great guy, was also reelected. So you see a lot of people who are splitting votes, crossing the line to vote for the person who they believe in. And also, just an indication of how important Wisconsin is to the national landscape. In 2020, the Democratic National Convention was meant to be held in Milwaukee because of the pandemic. It was held virtually. It wasn't held in person. But in the next presidential election cycle, the Republican National Committee is holding their convention in Milwaukee because how Wisconsin goes, and you know, look, this is truism. We know we're focused on Georgia, Michigan, places like that. Wisconsin is as purple as it gets, and both sides want to really plant their flags and try to drive that vote. You mentioned the Kyle Rittenhouse situation. You know, I was in Wisconsin during the first shooting. A black man was shot in his back 7 times by police officers. Kyle Rittenhouse used a self-defense in his defense, talking about self-defense, even though he was underage and carrying a gun at that time. You know, Wisconsin is full of stress points. I love that state. It is my home state. It is where I'm from. I returned there to have a business for a reason. But all of these issues are incredibly important, and there was an active effort, and in fact, Republicans talked about it with pride of how they tried to suppress the vote in Milwaukee. As Mika mentioned, 80% of the population of Wisconsin is white. Wonderful people, great people, but there are opportunities to really divide people in that regard. We can't have that again where people are actively suppressing the vote. Again, I may not like how that vote goes, but there's a difference between saying to everyone your vote counts or luxuriating, truly luxuriating the fact that you stopped people from voting. That's not right.
John, it is so great to see you, my friend. I know you miss sitting next to me as much as I do to you at 4 o'clock in the morning in Secaucus, New Jersey 15 years ago, but it's great to have you back on the show. You mentioned the Senate race there with Ron Johnson. Another one coming up, by the way, with Tammy Baldwin fighting to keep her seat in 2024. We'll see how that race plays out. Want to get your smart brain on the bigger stuff playing out that we've been talking about this morning as well. We've got a Manhattan DA potentially going to indict Donald Trump. We've got a case down in Georgia as well with the Fulton County DA down there. We've got January 6th. We've got the Mar-a-Lago documents all out in front of this former president, and also now a House of Representatives controlled by Republicans who are looking to rally defense around Donald Trump, talking about the, quote, weaponization of the federal government, the weaponization of the district attorney's office. What do you hear when you hear that term?
Yeah, I'm going to try to be very, very calm. And Joe, Mika, Willie, you know, I've been writing about policing and community going back to an article I wrote in Esquire. People may have challenged the direction I came from. They never challenged the facts. When I hear, and I want to be careful how I say this, because I don't want to paint with a wide brush or try to indict all white folks. But when I hear from privileged white men talking about the weaponization of the law, they don't know what they are talking about. As a person of color, as a black man, the law has been weaponized against us, going back to the Constitution and being considered 3/5 of human beings. What do you call slavery? What do you call failed Reconstruction? Jim Crow, segregation. If you are an Asian American, the Chinese Exclusion Act, that's weaponization. Executive Order 9066 is weaponization. I'm not going to explain what that is. I'm sure Professor Ron DeSantis will tell you all about that. If he won't, you won't read it about books in school. But individuals talking about the weaponization, you know, as black and brown people, we're told that part of the problem with negative interactions between community and police is because we don't comply. We don't listen. We don't appreciate law enforcement. We don't care about this country. But the moment that the process is in play, as it should, I don't know if Donald Trump is guilty or not, but I know that the court of law is where an individual goes to literally have their day. And when it happens to them, when the process is presented, all of a sudden, whoa, it's being weaponized. It's being turned against me. You know, you have Kevin McCarthy, you have Jim Jordan say, hey, we want you to come in, and they're saying this to Alvin Bragg, come in and answer questions. That's what the court is for. And I have a bigger problem. And again, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but when you have the Kevin McCarthys of the world saying to a black prosecutor, you need to come in and answer questions. Yeah, I'm sorry, we're not living on the plantation anymore. He has no right, no reason to ask this individual to come in and answer questions when that is what the court is for, that is what juries are for, That is what evidence is for. That is what grand juries are for. Not for Kevin McCarthy, not for Jim Jordan, who, by the way, when they're asked to answer questions, when you literally see a white riot and they don't want to talk about that, don't switch the game on us. Don't flip the script. And I would hope Mr. Bragg, well, I hope that he obeys the law and respects the law, as we do. Again, Joe, my father served in the U.S. military. He didn't hate this country. I had an uncle who was a Tuskegee Airman. My father-in-law, despite the fact that his family was interned in the Japanese internment, served his country. We don't hate this country. We love it. We love it with our flesh. We love it with our blood. We love it with our votes. But what we have problems with is when the law is turned against us, when the law is used as it chooses to be used by the prevailing culture. So again, I'm not trying to go off. I'm not trying to say this is representative of all white folks anywhere. It is not. But we see it. We see it, and it's painful. It's painful to us. Like myself, I believe sometimes I failed to serve my country in the way that I could have, but I'm happy for the ways that I do it with no studios. I'm happy with the ways that I do it to get people to vote. But it's painful and hard to do that when we see moments like this playing out in front of our eyes.
Well, think about this, John. You have those Republicans that you're talking about ignore subpoenas. They just ignored subpoenas. And now those same Republicans are saying to a black DA, we're going to subpoena you. You come on in here. Come on in here. You got to talk to us. We got some things to say to you. Think about this fact. And I've spoken about this on the show, and I find it remarkable that it took this country from 1776 to 1965 to actually begin moving toward being a more perfect union. We're still moving in that direction. As Reverend Al says all the time, we've had extraordinary gains over 50 years. We have a long way to go yet to be that more perfect union. But like you said, there's a lot to love about this country. You love this country. I find it remarkable that the Americans who have the least reason to love this country, given what they have been through for a better part of 200 years, black women were the ones that stepped up in Atlanta, stepped up in Philadelphia, stepped up in Detroit, stepped up in Milwaukee, stepped up all over America, and actually saved, and here's the great irony, they saved Madisonian democracy. They had the least of reasons, given how this country had treated them, and yet they love America, like your father loves America, like, and we have other people on who talk about this, whose parents served in the military, and they didn't hate America. They love America through it all. Proud to be Americans, proud to serve in the uniform, proud to wave the flag. And yet, these snowflakes of the Republican Party are triggered because they lose one election. They lose the 2020 election, and suddenly they hate the military. Ted Cruz says, I wish we could be more like the Russians. They hate the Pentagon. Fox News says they're going to use helicopters that killed people in Afghanistan and bring them to America to kill us here. They hate law enforcement. They use American flags to beat the hell out of cops. They say the FBI is going to kick down doors and kill Americans that voted for Trump. They lie about even IRS agents saying they're going to Iowa to kick down doors with AR-15s and kill small business owners. John, they act this way because they lost one presidential election. They're ready to say, and I'll just say, they're ready to say, the hell with America. We hate America. We hate American institutions because we lost one election. And yet, these people that you speak of, your family, the black women that came out and helped defeat a guy who wanted to, quote, terminate the Constitution, they still love America. They still love America. It's a remarkable story.
Well, first of all, Joe, I agree with everything that you're saying. I really do. And I would say this as a black man in America. How can you not love this country, Joe? The fact that I'm sitting here with you, the life that I've had, the opportunities that have been built over generation by generation. My parents have said to me, and I believe I've said this to you before, Joe, on the show, they said, I'm lucky in two ways. One, I think they're kind of kidding on the square, but they said I was lucky to be born to a pair of great parents, and I do believe that. But I was lucky to be born in this country. And no disrespect to any other country on the planet, Joe, but where else could a young man come from a family who were slaves, who were chattel, who were beaten, to a family who believed in education? My father's parents, you know, they looked at the family and they said, my father was going to be a doctor. He didn't even have a choice. You are going to be a doctor. You are going to serve your country. And he did it. And he gave myself, my sisters, every opportunity there is in terms of education, in terms of furthering ourselves so that we could say to our children, do what you want. We don't care. We've built this family as far as any family can go. It's your time to succeed, to fail, to live, to do whatever you want like any other citizen. And to see people, as you say, Joe, one election that was legitimately lost, and people will talk about Florida and this and that. Al Gore conceded. People challenge elections within the letter of the law, but to have people riot, and if you've seen the Chris Rock special, I don't want to make light of this, but who are they trying to take the government from? Themselves. You know, it's not like, you know, it was a lot of black folks coming in and Hispanics and all this, and oh my God, everything is going to be different. But to them, just the idea that it wasn't more of the same. And as you say, it is not funny. Officers were beaten.
No, it's not.
Law enforcement was tested. People are stressed out. And that is where it becomes painful because we're told we don't love the law. We don't respect police officers. I'm sorry. I don't know when the last time you saw something like that happen and it was black and brown people at the fore. It's painful all the way around, but that's why people vote. You gotta vote. Black and brown folks, everybody, but you gotta vote.
Well, John Ridley, thank you so much. And the only laughing you're seeing is to not cry at this point for our country. And we appreciate your being on this morning. It is
Thanks, John.
Just past the top of the hour.
Great to see you, John. Throwback
Thank you, John.
Tuesday. It's fantastic.
Just past the top of the hour on this Tuesday, March 21st. And we start the hour with this.
And I gotta say, who would have ever thought that Donald Trump would be brought down by a porn star? All of us, right? It was pretty predictable, but yeah, Donald Trump paid Stormy Daniels to keep this story quiet, and here we are still talking about it 7 years later, so that would be another failed Trump business venture.
That is former Senator Al Franken on last